Again, it's not anatomy physiology class, so I will quickly go through anatomy of digestive system, basic physiology of digestive system, but then we're gonna mostly pay attention to hormones, because for digestion, hormones and enzymes and some other chemicals, let's call them digestive juices together, right? So because these organs right here, all of these organs together, they secrete these digestive juices. We call them digestive juices because it's combination of different types of chemicals, so you can digest, right? So that's the molecule that needs to be broken down, and it's done here within digestive system. So then it looks like that, so we can absorb it into the blood, right? That's it. When it's in the blood, it will get whatever needs to go. We will discuss this later. So basically, digestive system, we're going to discuss this, right? How to break nutrients, how to digest them, how to absorb them, and what chemicals participate in this type of reactions. Enzymes, hormones, and just secretions. Again, digestive juices. Not that important, but digestive system is pretty long, and you can look at this slide from here to here, right? Digestive system is broken down in two domains. If I'll jump to slide number 6 for a check mark, so that slide number 6 gives you the entire anatomy of digestive system, and this is kind of physiology, what it does. So digestive system includes digestive organs, 5, and includes accessory organs, 4. Digestive organs are mouth, esophagus, stomach, small intestine, large intestine. That's this tube, right? So all you see it here are digestive organs of digestive system. So we see here it says digestive system. So it has this organ, mouth, then it has this organ, esophagus, stomach, small intestine, large intestine. So digestive organs of digestive system, there are 5 of them. And accessory organs, organs that help, like accessory, right? So you're beautiful, but you have accessory, you're more beautiful, right? So accessory organ, liver, gallbladder, with an oral cavity, looks like a raspberry, right? Salivary glands. And right here behind the stomach is right, so let's 3, pancreas. So accessory organs, there are 4. So total 9. So 9 organs of digestive system, we break them down into the meat. So digestive organs functionality is just to take this food, bring it into the mouth, so it will pass, and then the waste will be taken out. Along the tract, right, we can call this alimentary canal, because hypothetically, right, if you look at this, if you will stretch this, right, the entire digestive organs, hypothetically, you can see through. Not really, but it's a tube, hollow tube, alimentary canal. So the food passes through that, and within this region, most of the foods, actually this region, most of the foods would be absorbed, right, taken into the blood. So the digestive organs, we need them. Go back to slide number 6. Digestive organs, we need them for digestion and absorption. All these 5 organs, we need to digest and absorb, because while the food is passing through this alimentary canal, or GI tract is just another name, right? You've heard of the GI tract, CT. GI tract or alimentary canal. It's the same thing as digestive organs, all of them, 5 together. So we will break down carbohydrate, protein, and fat, and then we will absorb it. Where? Into the blood. And there's some waste, something that we cannot digest. Obviously, we cannot absorb. So that becomes a waste, excretion. We'll be taking out, right? We'll be taken out of the system. We will discuss what we can, what we cannot digest and absorb. While the food is passing through the entire GI tract, we need to digest these nutrients, right? So accessory organs help us to digest, because accessory organs produce secretions or digestive, I will abbreviate, digestive juices. Different types of chemicals, cocktail. Now, that's why I would say digestive juices, because there are many of them. So pancreas, liver, gallbladder, salivary gland, saliva, right, being released from glands, right, glands. Within the organs, we have glands. Glands will release those chemicals, secretions, digestive juices, to help break down these bonds, to separate. So these digestive juices includes hormones, includes enzymes, and just combination of different types of chemicals. So basically, what happens, that's digestive organs, 5 of them, right? Oral cavity, esophagus, stomach, small intestine, large intestine. And then we have accessory organs. Liver, I don't like this liver. Liver, that's a gallbladder. And on this side, pancreas. And here is a salivary gland. Within the stomach, it's not an organ. We have hydrochloric acid, right? So glands, gastric glands, right, produce hydrochloric acid. So liver produces something, gallbladder produces something, pancreas produces something, and it secretes its chemicals. Oral glands produce its chemicals, or salivary glands produce their chemicals. Stomach produces chemicals. So while this food, let's call it bolus, right? Because you consume food, right, in the oral cavity, in chewing. Chewing is called process of mastication, breaking down food particles. So the goal of digestion is to break down big globules, macro, into the smaller as possible. So it's easier for enzymes and hormones, for enzymes to do its job, to break down bonds. Because these bonds would be broken down by enzymes and water, right? We can separate it. Hormones, as a reminder, they are regulators. Yes, we release hormones that participate in digestion, but without hormones, we cannot release juices. We cannot release those chemicals. So the hormones will act on pancreas, hormones will act on the liver, hormones will act on gallbladder, hormones will act on the gastric glands, hormones will act on the salivary glands. Hormones are regulatory molecules, right? From the brain, we release them. Remember, pituitary gland, hypothalamus, adrenal glands, and the kidneys. So all of those hormones are being released from accessory organs, and also there are some hormones that have been released within the stomach or within the small intestine, large intestine. They act on other organs or other systems or other glands in compartments or outside to release chemicals. So when the chemicals are being released, then we can actually speed up movement, transit time, right? Movement. What is transit time? What is movement? When the food passes, it's called transit time. because it's a canal, right? From point A to point B. So the food is being passed. So the hormones can speed up, transit time can slow down. Remember, from AMP2, here we have sphincters, muscle, circulatory muscle that controls that propulsion, movement, transit time. They can speed up if they will open, or if they will be closed, squeezed, they will slow it down. And hormones can also act on organs, can speed up or slow down. Hormones are regulatory molecules. So the hormones are traffic lights. Red, green, go, slow down, yellow, right? So these are the hormones, regulatory molecules. So all together, they work for the purposes of that food to get into oral cavity, right? And then pass. So when the food gets into the oral cavity with chewing, process of mastication, right? It's a physical digestion. We break big globules into something smaller, right? So it's easier to digest, further digest, so we can absorb. So here, it's another color, right? So here in oral cavity, as soon as we mixed food with saliva, now we can call the substance bolus. So that substance, food and saliva, is called bolus. And now this bolus passes through the esophagus. Here's the sphincter, gastroesophageal sphincter or esophagogastrosphincter from more proximal to distal. And here, the same bolus mixed with hydrochloric acid. Gastric glands release hydrochloric acid. Hormones will act on that. You smell food, right? You're passing by the bakery. It's called cephalic stage, right? So your brain, you smell, or you're hungry, physically hungry, so you feel gurgling, right? Or you can even hear it and feel it and hear it. So that's the release of chemicals, because now your body anticipates incoming food. So not necessarily bolus getting into the stomach and then we release hydrochloric acid. It's already too late. So it's basically our brain, as soon as you start chewing, so the body wants to prepare the compartments for the incoming food. So the gastric glands will release hydrochloric acid, anticipation of arrival of bolus. So bolus is here. Now it's mixed with hydrochloric acid. So when the bolus is mixed with hydrochloric acid, that substance we called chyme. Chyme. Some people say acidic chyme, but it's kind of redundancy because chyme is chyme, right? Because it's already acidic. So yes, it has some acid, right? It's part of hydrochloric acid. So that chyme, it's a substance of mixed foods, whatever you just ate, whatever you just swallowed. So it takes some time. It might take 2 hours, 3 hours, depending on the consistency of your chyme, bolus, or food. It depends. Maybe it's a protein together with fatty acids and carbohydrates. So the mixed diet and fiber, for example, fruits and vegetables, so that creates a package, so it's harder to break down. So the hydrochloric acid basically helps to soften the tissues, the fibers of the foods, so the enzymes can enter. So let's say that chyme looks like this. So the hydrochloric acid, hypothetical example, helps to open that molecule up. So now enzymes have easier time to break down bonds. It's exaggeration, but it's kind of, take it with some grain of salt. That's what happens. So then when the chyme is being squeezed and the stomach is constantly contracts, esophagus, stomach, small intestine, large intestine constantly contracts. So that contraction is called peristalsis, wave-like contractions. So the peristaltic movements propel, it depends, bolus or chyme food particles further down, all the way down, right, until we will excrete waste. So stomach also kind of churns, right? It has folds. So it will convert chyme into substance similar to toothpaste. So it's very digested. And then it will pass chyme through second sphincter, pyloric sphincter. This part is called pyloric sphincter. And now this chyme in small intestine. Now it is very important for the digestive system. I'm colorblind, so for me, colors, picking the same color twice is hard. So that bolus, nice. I mean chyme. So that chyme appears in small intestine. Stomach absorbs, right? So you have to digest it so you can absorb it. So about like 20% of foods. It depends on the type of food. It depends on, is it processed foods or non-processed foods. We will discuss this in carbohydrate lecture. So, but let's say stomach absorbs something, but major site for digestion, finalizing digestion and absorption happens in small intestine, happens in here. Even though we can digest minimally in oral cavity and absorb, let's say candy, right? Lollipop, you're sucking on a lollipop and it's sugar present in your oral cavity, you're not swallowing, and some of the sugar you can absorb because it's processed. The processed sugar looks like this, glucose, right? It's just one molecule. That's what we can absorb. Non-processed looks like that. So we do not just have time to digest and absorb because we swallow, right? Because that food sits in the oral cavity for a very short period of time. That's why it's very important to brush your teeth, because any residuals, leftovers in between your gums and teeth, if they sit there for the entire day before you brush your teeth and you go sleep, so the bacteria start munching on that and will produce toxins, and that leads to tooth decay. But usually we swallow it. So most of the digestion, even in the stomach, because there's a lot of things, there's a minimal digestion. Carbohydrate we cannot absorb or digest from the stomach because the enzyme is destroyed by hydrochloric acid. But proteins and fats we can, yeah. And from oral cavity we'll also, not particularly for the protein, because proteins are very coiled structures. Proteins looks like that. So in oral cavity, to digest protein, so it would look like this, open it up, right? We do not have a lot of, well, acidity there. So that's why when the stomach is acidic, normal acidity, which is 1.5 pH, has enough strength to kind of start digesting, denaturing, uncoiling, unraveling proteins. So enzymes can actually start separating amino acids so you can absorb it. So that's why it is minimal digestion in the stomach, almost to non-digestion in oral cavity. So that's why small intestine, because it's pretty long, it's called major site for digestion and absorption. Look at the small intestine. Small intestine has three parts: duodenum, jejunum, and ileum. Altogether 6.5 meters. It is around 18 feet long. It's long. It's like 2.5-story buildings. So while the food passing to the small intestine, now it has enough time to digest, break down, so we can absorb it. So most of the digestion and absorption happens here in the small intestine. To be more correct, the major site for digestion and absorption within these first two regions. Duodenum, let's say duodenum is short, somewhere here. Now let's follow this. That's duodenum, and then jejunum. right? So that's where we mostly absorb, digest, and then absorb nutrients. Obviously in the ileum as well, obviously throughout the entire small intestine. There's also about 5% of digestion and absorption, or mostly absorption, not digestion. Absorption happens in the large intestine. There's some minimal. Some food can trapped within small intestine and then finally would be absorbed through large intestine. Most of the water absorbed or reabsorbed through a colon, through the large intestine. Because when the food passes, chyme, passes through the small intestine, we also have to bring water in here. Because you see, enzymes and water together help to digest and absorb. So the water is being pulled towards small intestine, and where is it going to go? You don't want to have a watery stool, diarrhea. So through the large intestine here to the colon, we will reabsorb, we will return water back in circulation. It's a perfect system when it's healthy. So accessory organs, just a second. And the center protein is absorbed last, not really last, but out of the 3 macronutrients, but is energy extracted from carbs and lipids simultaneously, or does one get absorbed? It depends. Yes, I know there's some literature points out like the thing is that we spend most energy. Look from the energy point of view. We spend more energy to digest proteins than to digest carbohydrates and then to digest fats. We use from 0 to 5% of energy to digest fats. It's very easy to digest them. So there's no energy is being spent. Like carbohydrates, 10% of energy, and protein, let's say 20%, because they're coiled structures. So in that case, right, so you need more energy, and yes, you can say that proteins would be absorbed last and fats would be absorbed kind of together with carbohydrate. It depends on consistency. Depends. Are you producing enough of enzymes? Are you producing, maybe you do not have particular enzymes, like people that have allergies to lactose intolerant people, like that they have allergies to milk sugar. Your hormone balance, disbalance, right? Medications, state of mind, your stress. When I'm happy, I'm going to be drinking and eating. When I'm sad, I'm going to be drinking and eating, right? So it's all depends on brain. Like, are you producing on time those chemicals or not, right? The physical activities, before activity, after activity, during, there's a lot of things. So to put in perspective, right? If to isolate everything else, yeah, fats, right? Faster, easier, no energy than carbs and maybe proteins. But yeah. Yes, you're welcome. Right. So now chyme is here, and that's where the major digestion and absorption happens. Duodenum and jejunum. Remember DJ, right? Duodenum, jejunum. So liver makes bile. I'm going to put it here. Bile is not an enzyme. Bile is not a hormone. Bile is a chemical, secretion, digestive juice, however you want to look at it. So the bile is just a combination of cholesterol and bile salts. We need bile to digest fat. So the bile would be stored in the gallbladder. Liver makes bile and stores it in gallbladder. And then when the chyme gets here, bile is being released from the gallbladder because it's been stored here. And then the bile will get in there to break down fat. Bile breaks down big fat globules into smaller ones. I have slides for that. So the bile breaks down fats from big to smaller fat globules, so it would be easier to absorb. Think of bile as an emulsifier, as a soap. So when you're washing your greasy hands with the soap, with warm water, it's easier to separate that from off of your hands. So the bile as emulsifier pretty much does the same thing. Hormone has to act on the gallbladder regulatory molecule so the gallbladder can release bile. And the hormone that acts on the gallbladder is called CCK. I'm going to put H here. So the CCK hormone acts on the gallbladder, and in response, gallbladder releases bile. CCK can also speed up stomach emptying and slow down stomach emptying as well. It depends. Maybe you have a lot of food, slow it down, right? You're crazy hungry and you're eating very little, speed it up so I can absorb it faster. So liver makes bile, stores it in gallbladder, CCK acts on gallbladder, and that bile is being released. So you break down big fat globules into smaller ones. Pancreas has a very important job. So the pancreas is an organ, and pancreas is a gland. Pancreas can release insulin and glucagon. We will start looking at that next lecture in carbohydrate. Well, when we get to carbohydrates. But for digestion, directly, pancreas releases digestive juices. So let's say we call them digestive enzymes. Digestive enzymes. Enzymes to digest carbohydrates, proteins, and fats. Oral cavity releases digestive enzymes for carbohydrate, proteins, and fats. Stomach releases digestive enzymes for carbohydrate, proteins, and fats. And pancreas releases. But just because small intestine is the major site for digestion and absorption, these are the enzymes we're just gonna mostly concentrate. But keep in mind that oral cavity, stomach, and small intestine produces similar enzymes. They just called differently. Oral digestive enzymes, in the stomach, gastric digestive enzymes, and with the small intestine, pancreatic digestive enzymes for compartmentalization, separation, so easier to have a communication with. So these digestive enzymes to digest carbohydrates, proteins, and fats. So the hormone, let me erase here, hormone CCK, nice, right? CCK acts, similar CCK, acts on pancreas, and pancreas in response releases these digestive enzymes, and these digestive enzymes being released into the small intestine. So now you can finalize digestion of carbohydrates, proteins, and fats. So when you digest them, so you can absorb them. Pancreas also has a very important function because remember chyme, that substance that's been secreted or pushed or released from the stomach into the small intestine is just a right combination of foods of different types of molecules. It's still acidic. And enzymes may not function properly when the environment is very acidic or very basic. So there's a particular acidity, alkalinity within this structure. So the pancreas releases bicarbonate. Bicarbonate is a buffer, right? Bicarbonate. Street name buffer. Hormone secretin. And by the way, I have slides for every single thing that I'm doing right now here. I will show you. So the secretin, which is the hormone, will act on the pancreas. Pancreas releases bicarbonate, buffer, and that bicarbonate will be released also within the small intestine, within this side, duodenum, and it will neutralize acids. That's a very simplified version of what happens between digestive organs and accessory organs. So there's three enzymes when we call them digestive enzymes, right? For carbohydrates, we call them amylase. For proteins, we call them, I'm just going to use one general term, protease. There's different proteases. And for fats, we call them lipases. Obviously, oral cavity releases oral amylase, oral protease, oral lipase. Pancreas releases pancreatic amylase, protease, and lipase. And stomach releases, attention, gastric protease and gastric lipase. There's no digestion of carbohydrates because amylase would be destroyed by the hydrochloric acid. And then waste, right? Something that you could not digest, absorb, fiber. We will discuss fiber within carbohydrate lecture, right? And up here, that's the feces, and we will get rid of it. Think of that. The food we consume, most of the, let's say, not let's say, that's on a range, 90% of foods that we eat, we absorb into the blood. 90%. If you hypothetically, not hypothetically, directly, well, carnivore, right? Meaning that you only eat animal products, your waste is very limited. You will have a small amount of waste. Not necessarily you would defecate, go to the bathroom, not necessarily every day, not necessarily every 24 hours, let's say. But if you have a mixed diet, or especially vegetarian, where there's a lot of fiber that we cannot digest, we cannot absorb, again, we'll discuss this in carbohydrate lecture, you will have a huge stool, right? So is it good, is it bad, which diet is better? We will discuss this later. It's always good to have a mixed diet. I'm going to show you quickly slides for all that so you can mark them. And then we will do something. Well, we will continue on this. So slide number 6 is important. Similar slide number 8, the same thing, right? Here they're also sphincters, esophageal, gastroesophageal sphincter, and this is pyloric sphincter. Mastication, right? Process. Lipase, so oral lipase or lingual lipase. So this is the enzymes. Amylase, again, it's just based on the compartment. Not necessarily have to remember that. So we'll come back to the slides as well, definitely. Peristalsis, right? Rhythmic wave-like contraction, right? So the bolus can pass, I mean, chyme, in this case, it's already chyme, through to the digestive tract. Transit time, that I'm just highlighting what we just discussed. Transit time, movement from point A to point B. Factors, you don't have to remember factors because factors are self-explanatory. Anything can speed up or slow down digestion time. This is important. Naturally, well, usually, again, it takes 24 to 72 hours for complete digestion, absorption, or for complete transit time, let's say from here to here. So 72 hours clinically is normal. Like if you're constipating for 72 hours, you're gonna go to hospital, they're gonna complain, they're gonna give you laxative, send you home. 3 weeks, obviously it's a problem, right? Because something somewhere not moving, it's a hole. So people can lose this transit time if there's a damage, because it's all muscle controlled by the nervous system. If there is a damage, cells of Cajal, right? If they damage, if it's a stroke, for example, that can damage some of the organs of digestion, right? Swallowing, whatever. So anything can damage the organ. So and people can lose this peristaltic vein-like contraction. Sphincters, one-way valve, right? So you're supposed to go one direction. Obviously, when you throw up, they will relax. There's a mechanism for that. Chyme, there's a lot of information, but just know that chyme is just a mix of bolus and hydrochloric acid. That's all. Hydrochloric acid. It's a chemical, right? That helps to soften structures, helps to digest. That's all like that. Mucus, we'll discuss mucus. Yeah, let's do it now. So the entire digestive organs, all of these 5 organs, covered by the layer of the mucus. So the mucus is that leaky, sticky substance that protects the internal lining of organs, including oral cavity, esophagus, stomach, large intestine. The thickest within the stomach, because we have hydrochloric acid. The thinnest within the esophagus and small intestine. So when people have GERD, gastroesophageal reflux disease, when the hydrochloric acid goes against the flow, just because there's a very small layer of mucus, that can lead to burning sensation. Eventually, that can lead to ulcers, that can lead to cancer. So it has to be taken care of. Why it can happen? Maybe we will discuss this. We'll come back to this. We'll come back to this. I just want to go through what we covered so you will know. So duodenum and jejunum, major site for digestion and absorption. Accessory organs, salivary, right, glands, pancreas, liver, and gallbladder. So for the purposes of this course, the only thing that is important for us is slide number slide number 57. So liver makes bile, sends it to gallbladder. We will discuss this next in carbohydrates. And then gallbladder releases bile into the small intestine when CCK acts on gallbladder. For now, it's just this. For now, pancreas digests carbohydrate, proteins, and fats, amylase, protease, lipase, and bicarbonate, right? But amylase, protease, and lipase also with an oral cavity and in the stomach, except amylase. But for the small intestine, this is important, right? Amylase for carbs and so on. And bicarbonate, right? Buffer to neutralize acids, right? So there's common ducts here. So the secretin acts on pancreas to release bicarbonate, and CCK acts on pancreas to release these 3 enzymes. It's actually here in slide 59. Hormone CCK releases bile, bile from gallbladder. And secretin, sodium bicarbonate, just bicarbonate buffer. And obviously CCK also from the pancreas releases these enzymes. There's another view of this process, slide 61. CCK acts on pancreas, pancreas releases enzymes, where? Into duodenum. CCK acts on gallbladder. Gallbladder releases bile where? Into duodenum or duodenum. Secretin acts on pancreas. Pancreas releases buffer into duodenum. So this is what we discussed so far. All right, let's go back. This is the overview of the digestive system, right? 9 organs. Saliva. So the saliva assists with swallowing and taste sensation, right? So it moistures your oral cavity, and we have buds, taste buds right here, right? Specifically, especially on the proximal or distal part of a tongue, right? Pungiform, foliate form, valate, papillate, terminal sulcus, palatine, lingual, not important. Well, there's tonsils, right? And there's also taste buds, right? So these are the taste buds, and these are the tonsils, right? Again, taste buds, all general. So they are able to we are able to distinguish between 5 basic tastes: salty, sour, sweet, bitter, umami. I mean umami. I'm sorry. So the umami is the like type of metal taste. So altogether, the cells, right? So these particles, our system converts into that electrical impulse, and that will travel through the olfactory taste, right? Olfactory cells, and will get to the nose, right? Oh, I'm sorry. All this gustatory, right? Gustatory cells, and the smell through olfactory cells, right? Everything will be converted into that electrical impulse and arrive into our brain for perception and matching with what we already had or something new. And then you create new synapses in your brain, and it's like either like it or dislike it, because you will activate different parts of the brain connections. Euphoric feeling, right? Releasing some type of endorphins because you're satisfied with what you're smelling or chewing, and looking at food as well. Some people can look at food cephalic stage and start salivating. So taste gustatory cells and smell olfactory cells. So composition of saliva is by far complex, right? So it has water, calcium, phosphorus, fluoride, antibacterial agents, and buffer. We release buffer from the pancreas into small intestine to neutralize chyme. But we also produce buffer that bicarbonate within the oral cavity to protect enamel, to protect lining of the oral cavity, because when you're chewing on the foods, right? So there's some acidic foods. So I think I have somewhere here the pH scale of foods. Yeah, here. Oh, right, neutral 7. We all know that. Bread, acidic. Bananas, acidic. Cola, beer, wine, vinegar. Well, who drinks vinegar? But let's say, well, in the morning, some people apple cider vinegar, thinking they're gonna help themselves. Whatever. Cold beer, wine, lemon juice. It depends, right? It's very acidic. It's a tenfold, as you should know by now, right? Tenfold. Here's a tenfold. So bread is 100 times more acidic, right? Because this is 10, this is 10, 10 multiplied by 10 is 100, and so on. So every time you jump from 7 to 6, from 6 to 5, you multiply by 10. And that's how you arrive to 1 million times more acidic hydrochloric acid, the gastric juice. And we have enough of mucus thickness to protect the lining. So oral cavity also releases this bicarbonate buffer to protect the oral cavity, protect enamel, because when the bacteria produces, and it's constantly bacteria, one of the dirtiest organ in the system, one, not the most, but one, oral cavity, because we constantly, right? So the buffer neutralize, so the bacteria produces toxins, and those toxins, the pH drops, let's say in oral cavity 6.8, and pH drops to 5.5, and that's where the bacteria strive, starts destroying enamel. And that's all leftovers, right? The food particles get stuck there. You do not brush your teeth. This is crazy important when you go into bed without brushing or removing or using this water pick. The best thing actually, water pick, because it will push all those leftovers. Brushing, not really. You can get, so for the 8 hours, 6 to 8 hours that you sleep, right? The particle is not going to be there. What if that particle is carbohydrate? What if that particle is bread, right? So it's easier to get there. It's carb. Bacteria is there. Amylase is here. Water is there. Has everything to digest foods into mono. And it's sugar. And that leads, well, not just the sugar, the actual toxins, waste that bacteria makes. That's a toxin that will start destroying enamel. So it has water, saliva, 99% is water, has calcium and phosphorus. Calcium is phosphorus, and phosphorus remineralize your enamel. Acidity demineralize, break it down, but calcium and phosphorus remineralize. Demineralization, remineralization, remineralize. So mineralize it back. Why and how? This is the tooth, and it has tubules, tiny, tiny pores within the teeth, within the tooth. So we leak them out when the acidity is high, like 5.8, or pH is low, right? 5.5, let's say pH. So they're leaking out by consuming something, or your saliva, because saliva has that, or eating hard cheese can remineralize, bring back calcium and phosphorus, because bones are made from calcium and phosphorus, and the teeth are bone. Fluoride destroys bacteria, also prevents demineralization. Antibacterial agents destroys bacteria, also may prevent demineralization. Bicarbonate buffer as well, and mucus, right? So composition is important. Lubrication, mucus, right, protects trap bacteria. Lysozymes, like antibacterial agents, kill bacteria. And amylase, digest starches. So yes, we produce amylase, to some extent proteases and lipases, but we don't really have time to digest proteins and fats in oral cavity. But carbohydrates, yeah, to some extent, starches. What is starch, we'll discuss in carbohydrate lecture. Parotid glands, right? So altogether salivary glands. So there's sublingual, submandibular, and sublingual glands. They pretty much composition is very similar, right? Water, electrolytes, enzymes, water, electrolytes, enzymes, but the sublingual and some submandibular glands produce, pardon my Ukrainian, produce mucus. So parotid, sublingual, and submandibular produce water, electrolytes, and enzymes, but sublingual and submandibular also produce mucus. That's not important, right? So that's biochemistry. So there's some extra information here. So basically, I would suggest stick to this, right? Uh, if you see something like that's not in the bullet, most likely it's not important. I will specifically tell you what's not in the bullet is important, and I will put it in the bullet. But for now, it's just I'm only covering what's in bullets. Remember, like ragase, right? Folds. So the stomach, look at the stomach. It's a muscle, right? So there's longitudinal layer, circular layer, oblique layers. So the stomach can churn, right? And digest food, digest food. The size of the stomach is the size of your fist, if you're a healthy person. But then it can stretch up to, it can hold up to 4 liters. It's like a gallon of water, right? It can hold gallon, but it's very stretchy. We'll discuss the importance of stretching and the neurological signals that will make you hungry, like appetite suppressing, right? We'll discuss this. Anatomically, not important, even though I have these blue dots here. Not. Know that this is the duodenum, right? The proximal portion of small intestine, and jejunum would be there, let's say. And the sphincter is called pyloric sphincter, right? So I would put here. Yeah, this is important. Pyloric sphincter, and this is gastroesophageal sphincter, or esophageal gastrosphincter, or lower esophageal sphincter. Right? Not that important how you will name that. So the small intestine, that's stomach. Chief cells, maybe I will come back to that. All right. Contraction, muscle later, mixes transform solid food into chyme, right? That's what happens from bolus, basically, to chyme. Shrunk peristaltic contraction, pyloric sphincter controls chyme in the small intestine. Right, so the control of movement, right, of that chyme into small intestine with each contraction, and contraction happens every 5 seconds, right? With each contraction, when it's been digested completely, so it can pass through this pyloric sphincter. So it's usually with each contraction, 1 ounce, 1 to 2 ounces of substance chyme will be expelled from the stomach into a small intestine. So we call it stomach emptying, right? So to the small intestine, peristaltic contraction, wave-like rhythmic contraction, happens on average every 5 seconds when the food is there. This is the resident, by the way. It's not on the bullets. I'm not putting check marks. I just circle that. Lactobacillus and streptococcus, resident bacteria constantly there. Yeah, it can really do the damage, but you know already, it's great that you have a lot of prerequisites for this course. So it's not the bacteria that does the damage, it's the amount, it's the volume of bacteria, right? Let's say thousands will not, but 20,000 will do something. I'm exaggerating numbers, but one more time. The pepsinogen, right? Yes, I want to mention this. This is a protease. Remember when I say protease, proteases have their specific names. I will mention that because in general it's important, but I'm not going to put a check mark here. So here in the stomach, we have a protease that digests proteins. It's called pepsinogen. But it's not the pepsinogen that digests, it's the pepsin that digests. Pepsinogen that digests proteins. It is inactive versus active. So pepsin is active form and pepsinogen is inactive form. So they are proteases. So when the food is not there, pepsinogen will not be converted into pepsin because the pepsin will actually start breaking down protein. But pepsinogen inactive, because if the pepsin would be constantly here, that pepsin will destroy the internal lining, right? The inner lining of the organ, because we're all made from proteins. So that's why its inactive form being present there has been released, right? So that's enzymes, right? So pepsinogen is inactive form and pepsin is active form. Altogether, we call them proteases. Also, for the nutrition class, it's important, but we will discuss this later. But just because it's here, I need to mention that. Stomach produces a chemical that is called intrinsic factor. We need this for activation of vitamin B12. If the acidity in your stomach is low and not high, if the acidity is not 1.5, there's a range, let's say 220, right? Like that. If the acidity is not high, I mean, acidity is high, right? If the acidity is not high or pH is not low, mind-boggling, right? Then it's harder for intrinsic factor to be activated. So those people that have GERD, gastroesophageal disease, or some other problems with the stomach, where the doctors decide to lower acidity, to increase pH, let's say to 3.5, then you do not have enough of acidity in the stomach to convert intrinsic factor in its active form or activate intrinsic factor. And if it's not activated, it cannot properly act on the B12, so we can absorb B12. I'm going to jump B12 we need to prevent anemia. So those people that on proton inhibitors that decreases acidity might have a trouble absorbing vitamin B12. And you can see this on the blood test. We're going to look at the blood test, definitely. I'm going to try to go through a lot of things in the blood test and make connections, how we can play a detective, not just reading high or low, the range, but actually connecting dots. So intrinsic factor is produced in the stomach, activated, and travels all the way to distal small intestine. That's a duodenum, jejunum, and ileum. And only within this region, it will be properly converted, activated, and then vitamin B12 would be absorbed. So the entire physiology, because if it's pathophysiology, it's in the next course. So the entire physiology is kind of complicated for absorption of B12. But the thing is, whoever created us, we just need very small amount of animal products, and you can get vitamin B12 from animal products, only from animal products, not from plant products. We need to eat very small, like this, right? The size of the fist, even smaller, of animal products. So we will have intrinsic factor properly activate vitamin. So we can help properly to absorb vitamin B12. I'm skipping on details for digestion and absorption of vitamin B12, right? Because it's next level of nutritional course, mostly biochemistry. But for now, it's just we need intrinsic factor to properly absorb vitamin B12. That's it. If the acidity is not low, but if the acidity is not low, right? If the acidity is not right, if the acidity is not low, like that 1.5 and something 3.5, then it would be harder for us to absorb vitamin B12. Yes, the intrinsic factor is mostly, well, it will be activated, but not enough. Usually pathways are presented. So it just depends on the If it's a healthy organ, it's just a certain amount would be released. It depends on the conditions in the organ. So intrinsic factor is only activated in highly acidic environment. Yes, yes, should be activated in normal acidic environment. What is highly? 1.5. Well, it's a normal. It's highly, but it's a normal. We cannot say it's highly. It's a normal acidic environment. So that means that people on an alkaline diet do not have activated intrinsic factor. Not really. The thing is that alkaline diet should not affect the environment in the stomach. No, should not. In healthy people, alkaline diet would be more on the vegetable side. Acidic diet would be more on the protein side, right? Proteins, amino acids, they have nitrogen. So animal diet, more acidic side. Um, Vegetarian diet, more alkaline side, right? But we're talking about the shifts within the blood, and the shift within the blood is very narrow, right? And the shift within the fluids in the system as well that can go off of this. Only blood has to stay within the system. So we have buffer that controls that. So urine, for example, right? So people could be very acidic with the urine because they are on animal diet, and the people could be on alkaline side shift when they have that vegetable diet mostly. But your body tries to buffer and tries to create homeostasis, balance with everything, right? So this swings are very shifts from left to right are very narrow if you have a healthy body. Obviously, if the organs fail or the hormones and other enzymes and other chemicals, yes, then you can have like a huge swings. So that alkaline water that people drink, it's unnecessary unless your doctor told you that yes, you have to drink this alkaline. Then yes, listen to your doctor.
So to be clear, Professor, the alkaline diet doesn't affect the intrinsic factor.
Should not. It should not, because the stomach has to still cooperate and release the normal amount of hydrochloric acid to digest vegetables, not to digest, to extract nutrients. I'm gonna put nutrient. It could be minerals, it could be carbohydrates, proteins, fats, nutrients. To extract nutrients from fiber, these are the nutrients, and this lines represents fiber structure. Cellulose, skin of the fruits and vegetables. So these nutrients, they are attached to the skins, right, chemically. And this fiber are made of glucose molecules, but we will discuss in carbohydrate. So hydrochloric acid helps to soften the fiber structure so the nutrients could be released. So to digest vegetables, you also need proper environment amount of hydrochloric acid in the stomach. So that's your alkaline diet in normal environment, in healthy body. Vagus nerve releases acetylcholine. Nope. Acetylcholine and histamine stimulates hydrochloric acid. It's mostly pathophysiology, anatomy physiology, and pathophysiology. Not now. Mucus from mucus neck, pepsin, HCl lubricates and protects mucus, right? So you know it lubricates and protects from prostaglandins, nitric oxide, prostaglandins not creates code to. I will mention that it's kind of, again, it's pathophysiology, but it's very interesting because it is part of the digestive system in the stomach, right? We have prostaglandins. they're pro-inflammatory markers, they're pro-inflammatory chemicals. So pro-inflammation, when you are in inflammatory state, or pro-inflammation, which is normal. We need inflammation and we need anti-inflammation. That will be discussed in this course as well, with fats, when we're going to discuss omega-3, omega-6. So with pro-inflammatory state, we release a lot of mucus, normal. If we release too much, not normal, right? Because you have absorption here, cells, right? Cells. And all of a sudden you release a lot of mucus. It's harder for the nutrients to get to the cell, so you can get to blood, right? It would be like thick coat layer of the mucus on top of the cells, and you cannot pass through. So the prostaglandins are responsible for that. The prostaglandins are created by immune cells, or by destroyed, damaged cells. So there's body pro-inflammatory state, so you can start healing process, for example. So, but if we produce too much of mucus, it's good. It protects the stomach from the hydrochloric acid. But the mucus we produce everywhere, in small intestine, esophagus, right? Even large intestine, oral cavity, pancreas, liver. So all these ducts would be clogged, blocked. Sexual reproductive organs, mucus there. So it's not a good thing. But we're only talking about stomach right now. So people who suffer from GERD, those anti-inflammatory drugs, NSAIDs, non-steroidal anti-inflammatory drugs, right? NSAIDs. So they lower pro-inflammation, which is a good thing, because maybe you have pain, sprained ankle, it's good. But people who chronically takes that, so that lowers prostaglandins, you lower prostaglandins and you produce less of mucus. So why NSAIDs lead to ulcers in the stomach, or duodenal ulcers, duodenal or ulcers, or esophageal ulcers? Because the NSAIDs, anti-inflammatory, they act on prostaglandins, and prostaglandins needs to release mucus, but you suppress them, less mucus, damage to the lining, because the hydrochloric acid can get to the lining here, anywhere. Chronically. Acutely, it's fine, but chronically, people that sitting on non-steroidal inflammatory drugs, usually like chronic pain. But then again, if the doctors prescribe, keep taking them. But that's what can happen. Once you know the mechanism, then you can make a proper decision. So that's why I wanted to mention prostaglandins. Aspirin is just an example, right? Without any type of non-steroidal. It's good that it's non-steroidal, but chronically, yes. I'm a wrestler, so I'm a grappler, so I constantly wrestle, right? BJJ. So once a month, maybe 2 days in a row, I take a few of ibuprofen. It's fine. But it's not chronic, right? The people take 2, 3, 600 milligrams 3 times per day. Yeah, they suppress pain, but that comes with a huge side effect. Can lead to loss of iron, can lead to anemia, loss of iron, bleeding, right? And not just loss of iron. Yes, loss of iron as well. Steroidal is worse effect than NSAIDs on mucus. No, I don't think there's a correlation between that. But the steroidal chronic consumption, well, prescription, steroidal, the thing is that it's a non-steroidal anti-inflammatory drugs, something different. It has no correlation, but just because you mentioned something steroidal, hormones, right? One, because NSAIDs are not hormones. But they can act on glands to release something. But because it's anti-inflammatory, anti-inflammation includes hormones, enzymes, the entire system. But just because I mentioned steroidal hormone versus non-steroidal hormone. Steroidal hormone enters in the cell and gets inside of the nucleus. Non-steroidal hormone has to bind to the receptor. So there's better control. This is a faster recovery when you get inside of the nucleus and you tell the ribosomes to produce something right away. So, but over time, chronically, that can lead to a lot of bad problems, osteoporosis, for example. So if you take in some hormones, again, doctor will prescribe, yes, but you have to know that steroidal hormones chronically more dangerous than non-steroidal. But NSAIDs, there's no correlation between this. So gastrin, G cells, right? Gastrin, hormone gastrin regulates or stimulates release of hydrochloric acid. Interesting factor that would be important later. Pepsinogen. Yes, I want to explain this process. I need to explain this process. Yeah. It's not on bullets, right? But I need to explain, so it is important. So the lining of the stomach and the lining of the small intestine is complex because there's a bunch of cells, different types of cells that release different types of chemicals, secretions for digestion, proper digestion. So hormone gastrin released by cells, G cells, enteroendocrine cells, that regulates release of hydrochloric acid. Not only gastrin can release hydrochloric acid, there's some other things that can act on these G cells that can release hydrochloric acid, stimulate to release them. So hydrochloric acid important for conversion of this pepsinogen into pepsin, right? It's a protease, so we can digest proteins within the stomach. So within the stomach, we have two cells, chief cells, and where are they? Just a second. It's right here. And parietal cells. So the chief cells, like important chief, right? Release pepsinogen, inactive, precursor to pepsin. And that pepsinogen is being converted into pepsin. So that's all proteases. And the pepsin, this protease, breaks down proteins. So the chief cells basically make sure that the pepsin would be released. So the hydrochloric acid acts or helps to release an enzyme that will start digesting proteins. Parietal cells directly releases hydrochloric acid. So chief cells release protease, which is the pepsin, and parietal cells release hydrochloric acid. Gastric cells, parietal cells, hydrochloric acid, or the pepsin. You see, here's a pepsinogen. Look at this. Parietal cells release hydrochloric acid. Chief cells release pepsinogen. Pepsinogen converted into pepsin. So the pepsin can act on itself on the conversion, on pepsinogen, right? Kind of, to enhance release of itself. That's how complex it is. So any deviation or dysfunctionality of the cells may lead to malabsorption, not proper release of chemicals that are responsible for digestion, and that can lead to malabsorption, because if you cannot digest properly protein, carbohydrate, and fat, you will not absorb it. It will end up in the large intestine. In the large intestine, something that you could not digest and absorb would be fermented by bacteria. Bacteria in large intestine do not digest, do not absorb. It ferments like beer, like brewing beer. And that can lead to gases, distension, flatulence, fart. So when you're thinking you're a healthy person, but by the end of the day, you have a distension, it means that something is not working properly, or you're getting older, you're releasing less, not enough of hydrochloric acid in the stomach, and you dumping food into small intestine, proteins that not digested properly. It passes through the small intestine, does not have enough time, ends up in the large intestine, and bacteria starts munching, and you have these gases. There's a lot of tests. Gastroenterologists, they have to see which part is not functioning. Is it too much of pepsin? Is that not enough of pepsin? Or maybe it's pepsinogen. Maybe it's glands, gastric glands, parietal cells. So there's a lot of tests that could be done. And when it comes to digestive system, obviously gastroenterologists, they know better. And on top of that, chief cells, right? So chief cells release also gastric, act on gastric lipase, release gastric lipase, enzymes that break down fatty acids. Not necessarily you have to know this pathway. In pathophysiology, yes, we covered that. In pathophysiology, this pathway would be important, because pathophysiology, if something is not working. So some students try to remember it today. Parietal cells, hydrochloric acid, chief cells, pepsinogen, and that's been converted into pepsin. The pepsin can act in itself. Hydrochloric acid acts on the conversion, pepsin acts on the conversion, and so on. There's another view of the same thing is here. You see chief cells release pepsinogen, hydrochloric acid converts pepsinogen into pepsin, and the pepsin starts digesting dietary proteins. Digesting dietary proteins, they were intact, and now they less, right? So you're going from polypeptide to tripeptide, but you still have to go to monopeptide so you can absorb it. That would be later. It would be in small intestine. But you already kind of pre-digested protein. So when it gets into the small intestine, now the body will start finalizing the digestion. That we will discuss that. See, partially digested protein, anything oligo, it's from 3 to 8. Anything that poly from, well, with protein, that's 100 amino acids together. It's just oligopeptides directly stimulates G cells, yes, as well. Yeah. The presence of mal-digested, it's normal, or I'm sorry, not mal, partial, because mal means there is something wrong, right? Not working correctly. Partially digested proteins can also stimulate the G cells. So the G cells can start releasing more of hydrochloric acid. So it's like presence of nutrients acting on the cell environments and glands, so you can release more and more and more. Because you want to digest everything that we're being programmed to digest. Because if something you've been programmed to digest, you're not digesting, you're not absorbing. You're not absorbing, ends up in large intestine. Bacteria starts munching, fermenting, leads to flatulence gases. right? pH, food partially digested, right? Another view of the same thing, right? Parietal cells, chief cells, parietal cells, hydrochloric acid, chief cells. Zymogen, the term zymogen, it's enzymes, right? Different types of enzymes. We can say proteases or we can say zymogen. It's just another term for that. Partially digested because then it gets into the small intestine, into the duodenum, and then I will mention that since we're in the subject. In the stomach, you have pepsin. In the small intestine, to finalize digestion, you have trypsin. So the precursor would be trypsinogen. From the pancreas, it would be released. Here from the stomach, pepsinogen converted into pepsin. From the pancreas, it would be released trypsinogen converted to trypsin. I just mentioned that, not that. I will not ask you that. So, but all of them are just proteases. That's how complex it is. So if you're not digesting, if you're eating animal products and then you feel like you're bloated, the gastroenterologists have to take a test and see maybe you're not releasing or under releasing not enough of a particular enzyme. So could be suggested eat less, smaller portions. We will discuss this later. We discussed this in AMP2, molten gold, right? Pairs patches will also discuss that. It's not on the bullets, but that should be familiar. IgAs, right? Immunoglobulins, we discussed that. Small intestine, like stomach, has layers and layers and layers, right? So this is the absorptive area, right? The lumen, emptiness of the organ, the muscles. There's a neurological layer, there's blood vessels, and it's all surrounded by the serous membrane. The serous membrane releases the outermost layer, releases lubricant, right? So releases lubricant. So because small intestine is coiled, right? Look at that, like this. So one side of the small intestine would not be stuck to another side, so that serous fluid, when it's been released, so it helps to kind of movement. Small intestine, you see these folds, right? So these folds are covered by something that is called villi. See the square? It's just one finger-like projection, like this. Villi or villus, one. And villi is surrounded by enterocyte cells. So this folds, we call this like a brush border because it looks like this. So the entire lining of the small intestine covered by this brush border. And obviously, small intestine has lots of layers of the muscle, similar to stomach, longitudinal, transverse, diagonal muscle, so it can contract, right? Peristaltic contraction. So, but that's where you finalize digestion. We will be looking more into digestion in carbohydrate lecture. So when it looks like this now, monosaccharide, let's say monopeptide or free fatty acids, now we're ready to absorb them, and they will be absorbed to this cell. So the cells enterocytes, so they line the entire villus. And then once you get, let's say blood is here, so the nutrient is here, let's say glucose, it will be trapped by this villi, get inside of the enterocyte cell, and from the cell into the blood. You see these blood vessels. So from the cell, it will get inside the blood vessel, and that's absorption of a nutrient. To be more precise, so there's a villi And there's also microvilli. That's important. So here's the cell. So that's this villi, and it's covered by cells, right? Like that. That's it, right? And they have this lines called microvilli. So if this is villi, this is microvilli. So the microvilli, they trap nutrients, like, right? So if it's all digestive tract, right? And here the blood vessels inside, right there. So this is a GI tract, right? Small intestine. So the nutrient that was digested now it looks like this, and this microvilli will trap it and will absorb it. There's extra step here. We will discuss this extra step in carbohydrate. Because within microvilli, we can finalize the digestion from disaccharide, let's say, to monosaccharide, but that's in carbohydrate lecture. So it's basically microvilli takes this nutrient and they absorb it, and boom, you're already, right? Well, we'll take it, we'll pull it, and it's already in the blood circulation, right? In the portal, to the portal vein, we'll get to the liver. Liver most likely is the organ where the nutrient will travel to after it's been absorbed. Small intestine, major site for digestion absorption. Duodenum, small intestine, divided into 3 sections. That's where mostly happens digestion and absorption. Yes, these folds are Perkin folds. Enteroside, entero inside, absorptive cells. Remember this enterocytes, because when we're gonna discuss bacteria, the bacteria is important for enterocytes. The byproduct that bacteria creates important for enterocytes. That would be later. So the villi are this finger-like projections. Glycocalyxes, we will discuss that next lecture on carbohydrates. That's basically I want to mention now. That's the microvilli, and that's this disaccharide. So the glycocalysis, that's where the digestive enzymes will finalize digestion. So now it looks like that. But we will discuss this mechanism later. So the surface area of the small intestine is huge because of these folds. So because if you stretch this in different directions, so it's 300 square meters, the size of the football field. That's how huge the small intestine, even though it's only 6 meters, 18 feet. But just because of these folds of this brush border, if you will stretch it, you can cover the entire football field. This is a trivia information. So the peristalsis, or the rate of contractions in the stomach, about kind of in general, like 3 times per minute. In small intestines, like 8 to 12 times per minute. Usually we say like 5 every 5 seconds. In general, in distal small intestine, like 7 times per minute. In the large intestine, 3, 4, 5 times per day. In the morning, when you're sitting on the toilet and you want to defecate, the contraction of the large intestine happens 3 to 4 times because you have feces here, right? So when you have urge to defecate, to pass stool, all you need is just a few contractions. Because if you will have constantly contractions, you would be constantly sitting on the toilet, right? So you can lose these peristaltic contractions. That's a constipation we'll discuss in carbohydrate. So the digestion not the digestion, diarrhea or constipation we'll discuss in carbohydrate lecture. Again, this is just a trivia. Nobody remembers these numbers. Usually every 5 seconds on average. It depends on mixture, depends on the food, depends on the type of the food, right? 2 to 6 hours. Usually it's up to 4 hours. That's when you're hungry, right? So 2 3 hours usually. It depends. It all depends on mental state and everything else. Each compartment, because remember, this is like streptococcus and lactobacillus. That's major, let's say, streptococci, coccus, lactobacillus. That's major bacteria and throughout the entire body. But each compartment has their own phylum of bacteria, and the sphincters that separates small intestine from large intestine. The sphincter is very important. um, it's ileocecal sphincter because we have here completely different resident of bacteria compared to small intestine bacteria. Here we have more on the toxins side bacteria, and the small intestine we have less than toxin. Maybe we have the same type of bacteria, but the residence, the volume is different. Here we have more because that's for the toxins, and they're sitting there for, let's say, 24 hours, and the bacteria produces more and more and more toxins. Good bacteria, that bacteria is still. So that's why this ileocecal sphincter, it's one-way valve. So if this bacteria travels somehow back, it's like invades another type of army and they start fighting. So that can also lead to flatulence, gases, distension, right? So any type of distension can lead to relaxing of that sphincter and going back. So the best suggestion for anyone who suffers from bloating, that we'll discuss on carbohydrate as well, but for now, bloating or bloating distension, if you discover that you have that, because usually in the morning you wake up, you're completely fine, and then through the course of the day, by the end of the day, you have that. Eat smaller portions of food and see how you will react. Or cherry pick. All right, I'm eating this. Am I bloating? No. Eating this, eating that. Elimination diet. We're gonna look at that type of diet. It's not a diet; it's a process. You eliminate foods. You just eat this type of foods and see how you will react. That's, for example, if you would go to dietitian and you have this trouble problem, so that would be the course to see which foods you react on. That's best invasive, non-invasive way to figure out. It takes time, might take a year. It might take a year for some people if it's something very problematic. But usually with age, I know that if I eat a lot of meat, animal products, and I will add some grains, a lot of animal products and some grains, that can lead to some bloating. But if I eat a lot of meats without grains, then I have almost none, for example. It all depends. With age, we produce less enzymes, different hormones, they not function as they used to function, such and such and such, right? Regardless of how healthy you think you are or knowledgeable, right? We still gonna develop diabetes. I didn't say that. One of the prominent scientists said that if we would live long enough, everyone would develop diabetes. We'll discuss diabetes definitely in carbohydrate. Um, Bacteria is not important, but lactobacillus and streptococcus is there everywhere. The duodenal bulb sends large volume of chyme. Pressure can lead to increase of transit time, osmolality, pulling water. If you pull too much water, bloated. High carbohydrate diet, high sugar diet, high processed foods diet, it's all carbs, leads to a lot of water being pulled because you need water to properly digest carbs. So with enzymes as well. So that will lead to bloating because all this water cannot escape, right? From the cell, you bring water into the alimentary canal. That water has nowhere to go. It goes into the large intestine. And that would be reabsorbed back in circulation. But that's bloating, right? So it takes time for the water being returned back in circulation and leave this compartment. So eat less of processed foods so that shift to fluid, right? So you remember law of osmosis. And again, also important for hormones release, right? To reabsorb water, to hold water. ADH hormone, aldosterone, mostly patha, we will be looking at this. That's interesting. Again, no one, well, unless you're constantly every day working with this, you do remember that. So this is the small intestine, including right here. I'm sorry. This is the small intestine, right? Yeah, let's include large intestine as well. When we absorb nutrients, not necessarily you will absorb calcium only here, right? You can absorb any nutrient throughout the entire digestive tract, right? I'm excluding oral cavity, right? Because nutrient could be trapped within particles and not absorbed, right? Here, what it's supposed to be. But most of the, as a rule of thumb, most of the minerals, anything that comes from periodic tables is a mineral, right? Well, from food, right? Most of the minerals your body wants to absorb it as soon as it can, right? But not necessarily. Could be absorbed anywhere. So you don't have to remember that, but you can look at this.